What's up? What's up? I'm Dr. Omatma, host of Egg Meet Sperm, where we're busting fertility myths, sharing tangible tips for your fertility journey, and bringing you the most knowledgeable guests to support your journey to parenthood. This podcast is for both women and men because getting fertile as fuck is for both partners, don't you think? Remember, just listening to this podcast won't get you pregnant, but following the tips we share just may. Let's get you fertile AF so that you can co-create the family you dream of. And if your partner's not listening to this, make sure to share this episode with your partner. Hello and welcome to Egg Meet Sperm. My guest today is Christine MacCaroll. She's a functional nutritionist specializing in women's health, hormones, and autoimmune disorders. She addresses the root cause of imbalances to facilitate whole woman healing using leading-edge evaluation tools, customized nutrition, and holistic healing strategies, with a hefty helping of straight talk. In addition to her private practice, she is the host of the podcast, The Bitch Fix, Health and Hormones for the Modern Woman. I love this title. I love this title. I think I said that the last time I read this. Welcome, Christine. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'm so excited to talk about nutrition because it is one of the foundational things that is important not only for hormones, but overall health. So in your experience, when you have women come to you and say, why do I need to focus on nutrition for my hormones? Can't you just give me progesterone or estrogen? What's your response to that? How does nutrition affect hormones?
So I think it is super foundational. And actually, it is one of those things where I feel like in some ways, the conversation has been putting the cart before the horse. Like as women start getting interested in hormones or understanding their hormones, and I love that conversation is expanding. But I think everyone, both practitioners and people who are wanting to know about women who are wanting to know about their hormones, are getting excited by things like fancy testing. So they're like, let's do a Dutch test and like find out what's happening with my estrogen and progesterone and testosterone and all of this. And people are excited to find out some of those sexy things. But the truth is, none of those sexy things would exist in our body if we didn't have any building blocks to create them. Right. So I'm a mom. I have a couple of kids. My kids are too old to play with Legos anymore, but I think about this as like Legos, right? Like when I was a kid, you just got the big box of Legos and you just built like whatever. Now they come with little kits, right? So it's like, here's your kit for, the Star Wars Jedi ship, or here's your kit for a dog or whatever. I feel like if you got a kit for your dog, but you were missing half the Legos, like you might be able to create something, but it's not going to look like the dog in the picture. So the things that we need to build healthy hormones come from the food that we eat, right? So we don't just like breathe air and then like build hormones. There are people who say they are airtarians, which I think is hilarious. But like for the most part, we need to get those nutrients to make things from somewhere. So if we are eating a really nutrient poor diet, or if we are eating things that are incredibly inflammatory to our bodies, we simply cannot produce those hormones, right? So we might not have the raw materials, or we might not have the cofactors that we need to get those materials together. So if you don't have the raw materials, you can't build, right? My other analogy is if you want to build a brick house, you need to have bricks, right? Like you could give me all of the cardboard in the world. You could give me like bales of cardboard, cargo ships full of cardboard. And still, if I need to build a brick house, I need bricks, right? So if we're doing like our modern diet is really a lot of cardboard and our bodies are trying to build hormones out of cardboard, we need bricks. So basic answer.
It's a really good analogy. I think that really helps the visual of like the processed food is kind of like cardboard, isn't it? Like,
it totally is. Yeah, there's about as much nutritional value as cardboard.
Okay, so what nutrients then are so core to good hormonal production?
Yeah. So I think we have to look at both macronutrients and micronutrients. And for both of those, like quality is paramount, right? So the macronutrients, I'm actually surprised because I will always ask someone when we're first talking, like, do you understand macros? That a lot of people don't have a clear idea of what macros are. Like they've heard of that concept, but it's the basics of protein, fat, carbohydrates. Proteins are usually in animal products. They can also be in things like beans and nuts and legumes, but they're not a pure protein. Then they're combined with other things like starches. We have fats, which people can usually identify fat. That's the one simple one. Like, okay, it's like butter and oil and, those sorts of things that seem fatty. And then carbohydrates are both things that are like processed carbs, like sugar or molasses or honey or something like that. Also like grains. So any grains, corn, rice, wheat, all of that is all carbohydrates. And then of course, produce like fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates. So we need macros. That is like the big blocks, right? So we need the biggest pieces, but those macros also contain micros. So those include vitamins and minerals. And this is where that cardboard analogy comes into place, right? Like if you have cornflakes as a carbohydrate, for example, that's going to provide the macro of carbs, but there's essentially no vitamins or minerals or anything that your body actually needs to run in those carbohydrates. So you might feel some level of energy because it's sugar, it's carbs, it's going to give you something, but there aren't any of those nutrients that we need like actually inside the cell to produce energy and give us energy and have things run. So when people get really obsessed with even like micros, and I see this more in like the dieting world where people are counting their macros to lose weight or something, but people still are like very obsessed with what's the macro number. So many people are completely disregarding the fact that our food like has these smaller components that really that's what is required to run energy metabolism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're saying like really the array of vitamins and minerals, which are the micronutrients found in the macronutrients that are all pretty crucial to good hormonal balance and good health in the body.
Yes.
So do you have some favorite nutrients or do you feel like everything across the board is pretty important?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, everything is important. That's another part that I think is problematic when we try and isolate just certain nutrients. Like folate got a lot of, or folic acid really, which isn't natural folate, but got lots of press starting in like the 70s and March of Dimes. And everyone was like, okay, got folate on board, which is important. So I'm not saying that's not important. When we start like super highlighting one or two nutrients, then people get the idea that they can just take a couple of vitamins and not eat whole foods. And whole foods have other things too, like fiber and phytonutrients and other stuff that we need to actually run our bodies. But, those micronutrients come together in food, right? So they come in a package and then that package works well for us. There are some specific nutrients, though, I will say, that are deficient for a lot of people who are struggling with fertility. And those are also nutrients, not surprisingly, that are depleted in our diets, in our soils, and what we're growing. I still remember when I first learned that thyroid hormone, like the hormone itself was literally just 2 ingredients, and it like blew my mind. So thyroid hormone is just tyrosine, which is an amino acid. We get amino acids from protein, and iodine, which is a mineral. And I was like, seriously, like there's 2 ingredients. This hormone is 2 things. Like it totally blew my mind. But it's not just those 2 things, right? It's like if you were trying to make an omelet and you had eggs and cheese sitting on the counter, but you didn't do anything to put them together, like they're not going to magically make an omelet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to have like cofactors like magnesium and zinc to get those ingredients together. So some things that are certainly important. Minerals are one of the top things I see as being depleted across the board for both men and women. Zinc is one of the top ones. And we get zinc, like the easiest to absorb form of zinc is in some animal products like liver and oysters. We can get it from things like nuts and seeds, like pumpkin seeds are high in zinc, but relative to the amount of food you would eat, it is just a little bit lower. So zinc is one of the top ones that we need for women. B6 is important for making progesterone. And like I've looked at thousands and thousands of food journals. and I evaluate them based on micronutrients as well. And B6 is one of the top ones that I see is low, even from an RDA perspective. So RDA is just like, to me, that's like the baseline to not get a disease that isn't what your body needs to be healthy. But women are not even meeting the RDA for B6. So you can't really make progesterone very well without B6. So zinc, B6, iodine for thyroid function, all of the amino acids we get from proteins. Those are some of the like biggest ones that I see as being missing.
Yeah. Amazing. So when we are, say, deficient or suboptimal levels of these micronutrients, actually, no, I want to backtrack even a step further. I want to go to this idea because you kind of said it and I want to like draw it out a little more. Is this what you said about the need for macronutrients and the main groups, protein, fat, and carbohydrates? Now, there are a lot of diets that restrict one or the other macronutrient group. What do you think about those diets and how they could be impacting hormonal production? Because a lot of people will swear by them and they have had miraculous results and all of this. And then they come to me for fertility and I'm like, yeah, no, we
can't do that.
We need to go back to eating those. So I'm curious your take on this as well, because I feel like there is this general thing of, oh, I'm just going to try this diet and this diet and this diet, and one of them will help my fertility or one of them will fix my hormones. And then when it doesn't happen, or it happens for a little while and then it throws the body more out of whack, that's the part that I have a concern about.
Yeah. So maybe it works for a little while because you were able to use all of the nutrients that you had in storage. And then once you run out, you hit a wall. I see that a lot. Or you got some initial benefit because maybe you like reduced inflammation, but then you get this rebound effect. And
maybe you cut out processed food.
Right.
Like
yes.
Almost every diet is going to cut out processed food. So
mind-blowing concept, right? If only that, if we could just do that. So, I mean, first of all, I believe in bio-individuality. So just like we're all unique, we all have unique needs. Part of that includes like your history, like what was your diet growing up? What has your diet been like for the past 5 or 10 years? Because then we can see like, have you really gotten depleted in something that you need to make up for? That might make a difference in what kind of dietary strategy you need up front. But yes, 100%, everyone would benefit from a whole food diet, not eating processed foods, and as nutrient dense as possible. So bricks, not cardboard. Within the macronutrients, I'm not a fan of hyper focusing on one and to the hyper exclusion of anything else, because when we do that, we do miss out on that whole tapestry of nutrients that comes from that food group. And if you start looking at almost any diet when it's restricting something like, super high level of restriction, it's virtually impossible to get the micronutrients that you need. So like, keto diet, for example, it's like everyone thinks it's the best thing since sliced bread. I think when you super do that, like a lot of the like vitamins and minerals that we need are coming from carbohydrates, right? So particularly minerals or B vitamins, for example, like, yes, like B vitamins in beef, but not as much in like other fats. And I just see like the way that people employ it also, it is a way that isn't beneficial, right? So like, let's say, again, I'm going to pick on keto, but like super high fat, moderate protein. They're like, great, I could just go to McDonald's and take the bun off and now I'm keto. But like those oils are incredibly inflammatory. They're really bad quality. They're badly affecting the mitochondrial function. They're badly affecting our cell membranes, like the stuff that we just need to work, like for your body to just work well. It's poor quality and we're missing on some of those other things. Kind of, there was the low fat craze. I think that also really harmed women. Our hormones are reliant on fats and cholesterol, our sex hormones. We need those macros to be able to produce sex hormones. And also if we go incredibly low carb, and again, like there's a range here, but like incredibly low carb on the opposite side, something like that could be a stressor on the body. So we're increasing cortisol because it's a stressor. And then also if your body's like, hey, I need to produce or get some extra glucose out of storage because I don't have any coming in, well, let's go ahead and raise our cortisol levels So then we get a stress hormone response, and then we're imbalancing everything because it's created a super big stressor to the detriment of all the other hormones, right? So your body's always going to be like, okay, let's survive more than make babies. So
absolutely. And let's like pull from one side to feed the other side.
yeah.
And it can only like do that push pull for so long before there's a crash.
Yeah.
Right. And often I say this to women all the time. I'm like, the fertility is the least priority.
Yes. Yeah.
Survival comes before fertility.
Mm-hmm.
Reproduction is not needed for you to survive.
Right.
So if we're doing this push pull with like, oh, we don't have nutrients here, let's pull them from this other area.
Yeah.
Guess where they're pulling from?
Mm-hmm.
Usually the reproductive system.
Yeah.
All of those hormones just go awry because the priority is you survive.
Survival. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yes, I totally agree. And I think keto is sort of easy to pick on because it's an extreme diet. And with that said, like it can work for short periods of time. So I'm not anti any diet. But
same. I have a couple of women on keto right now for a specific reason.
Right.
But it's just like there's never one thing that's like the magic for every human.
Right. And like anything in short periods of time used in a therapeutic way can create healing.
Yep.
But it's a very short period of time. And once that short period of time is over, it like your body has to either get all of its resources needs met or it's going to pull from other things. So, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about inflammation because you mentioned it with certain quality of oils and food that you might be getting on this particular diet. But in general, I feel like, I'll just let you talk on like inflammation as it comes from food and the reactions that it's creating in our body. What does that do to our hormones?
Yeah. So, I just like to think about what's the health of a cell? Does it have what it needs? Or is it trying to kind of what you were saying? Are we pulling things in that are the wrong things for that structure? And it's just making do, right? So we need fats across the board because we have this little outer layer on every cell that incorporates fats and proteins, right? So I think about cells as like little water balloons. This is how I talk to my clients about it. They're like little water balloons. And inside we have water and a whole bunch of other stuff that's working. And then there's this little layer that is made of fats and proteins. And your body's going to use what's available. So if it has some, let's say, trans fats, like most people have heard that trans fats are bad. Trans fats are inflammatory. If we have some trans fats, if we have some super high level of rancid omega-6 fatty acids, omega-6 fats they're in healthy food and in processed food. So there's the quality question there. But like, let's say we got some oxidized, rancid soybean oil, and we're using that to create a cell membrane. Now those cells, first of all, cell-to-cell communication is not going to work. They can't talk to each other very well if the communication mechanism is built from something faulty. We also just can't produce healthy cells to begin with. So it's almost like if you were supposed to have a straight Lego, I was talking about Legos earlier, and instead you had an L-shaped Lego, and you're like, well, this is all I got. Stick this L-shaped Lego in here, but it's supposed to be a flat Lego. It's going to create this inflammatory cascade. And omega-6 is some of the worst ones that are in the modern American diet, especially when they are like, I always say, don't eat anything that you wouldn't eat as a food, right? Like cottonseed oil, nobody is sitting around pulling the seeds out of cotton and like snacking on that, right? Just a terrible idea.
And cotton being one of the most heavily sprayed plants with Roundup or glyphosate, which has a horrendous effect on our gut microbiome, on our fertility, on our reproductive microbiome. Like I can just go on and on about cotton.
Yes.
But then like to top it off, like let's take the seeds of the cotton and make oil out of it. It's just like,
chemical extraction process. Yes. So like the chemicals to extract it, because you don't just naturally get oils out of cottonseed, right? So we go through this process. We get these super inflammatory oils. It's the cheapest thing. So it is in like everything. And you could be looking at organic food and you're like, I'm buying organic. But if it's high in these processed industrial oils, like soybean is another one, I think soybean is the number one. So soy, cottonseed, even ones that people think of as like healthier, like, safflower and sunflower oil. When we have a super high amount of those and they've been highly processed and then they are used to fry things, so like making chips and crackers. So we're exposing them to high heat. They're incredibly delicate oils. We're instantly breaking down that chemical structure. We're instantly creating L-shaped Legos instead of flat Legos. And then this is going to go sit in the cell membrane. It's going to be forming the mitochondria. There is some really interesting research actually just came out like a month ago, I want to say, polyunsaturated fats and the mitochondria in sperm. And they preferentially are pulling in these polyunsaturated fatty acids. And again, if all that's available is some crap fat, we got cottonseed oil that's been deodorized and chemically processed and all of that. And that's what we're using to create the mitochondria inside a sperm. Of course, it's not going to work as well. Like it has the wrong Legos. So yeah, super important.
Yeah. Okay, so just to recap, so far we've talked about macronutrients, micronutrients, inflammatory foods in the form of oils and things that are processed. So let's shift a little bit and let's talk about what foods to incorporate to support healthy hormones.
Yeah. So I do think just a whole food diet is a great place to start for anybody. And then, once you assess, you can assess by just looking at a food journal and looking at your own. So a professional can certainly help and look. You can look at your own food journal, see what nutrients are missing. There's some software that I love. I use it professionally, but anyone can get access to it as well, which is called Chronometer. Actually, I think they might say it Chronometer. I don't know if there's a way to say it, but Chronometer, you can get a free account and you track your food. It'll show you what macro and micronutrients are in that, including like omega-6, omega-3, the ratio, all of that. So you can just evaluate what you're eating already, see if you're getting the right macro and micronutrients is a good start. Some of the top foods that I think, I do think that to get sufficient protein and some of those micronutrients, there are some animal foods. I know that's even like everything has an opinion these days, but there's opinions on sides of that too. Liver is nature's multivitamin. Like if I could get more people eating liver, we seriously just cover so many bases nutrient wise. It's so funny if I am looking at somebody's food journal and I'm assessing after like a period of time, it's like, so one day they'll eat one serving of liver once a week. And all of a sudden I'll just see all of their micronutrients like even out. I'm like, because I look at this report that's like the average of the 2 weeks or something. I'm like, what did you just do? And then I like dig into the days. I'm like, oh, you ate liver on Saturday. That's amazing. But nuts and seeds can be high in some of the minerals. If that is true, sprouted is important to get access to those nutrients. This stuff used to be stuff I had to make. Like I had this counter that looked like a science experiment that always annoyed my husband. Now you could just buy this stuff. You get sprouted pumpkin seeds. It just means that those nutrients are more bioavailable when something has been sprouted. Watercress and other dark greens. So watercress is my favorite of the plant world as far as micronutrients. I think it's like the liver of like our leafy greens.
Really?
Yes.
Tell me more. I don't eat watercress.
So first of all, it's a bitter food. Bitters are great for stimulating bile flow, and then stagnant bile is a big issue also with crappy fats, right? For a lot of women with hormonal issues. So it is just really, I had pulled this earlier. I had my little notes over here of all the nutrients that were in there. It's more than 100% of the RDA of vitamin K is always the one I remember. Yeah, 106% in a serving of vitamin K, which is hard to get. Otherwise, usually our microbiome, is making it. So that's the other source of K a lot of times. So C, 24%, like everyone's always just giving all the love to citrus food, but lots there, even manganese, calcium, 22% vitamin A. So yeah, it's a super wonderful nutrient dense food. And it's a bitter, which I just think everyone needs to be getting on board with the bitter foods. So leafy greens, and then my top pick is watercress.
I am going to get some watercress this weekend.
You can find it a lot right now. It's like, this is the season. You can't always find it, but right now you for sure can. Yeah.
Awesome. And then have you grown watercress? Is that something that you have grown before? Okay.
I haven't.
So
no.
Find it, buy it, eat it.
I buy it. Yeah. Trader Joe's almost always has it. I have a funny story. When I was a kid, the first time I ever remember like this idea, I was like 4 years old and we were camping and my grandma had gone to this stream and she's like, oh my gosh, wild watercress. This is so exciting. I didn't even know what the heck watercress was. I was like, oh, okay. So she like picks it all. We go home and then she and my mom are all excited to like make some lunch with this watercress. There were tadpoles all throughout the watercress and they went to go flush it down the toilet.
Oh my God.
But I remember looking at the watercress and seeing all of these tadpoles in there and like just being horrified. But yeah.
Wow.
So naturally it grows in streams.
Yeah.
That's where you would find it if you're going to go foraging.
Oh, amazing. So if you are foraging,
go find it, look for tadpoles. Yeah. Awesome.
Sorry, I totally cut you off because I got super excited.
Wow, watercress. It is super exciting. Yeah. I'm going to say like those are my top foods: leafy green vegetables, organ meat, or the other one is shellfish. So like oysters are really high in zinc is one example. Mussels are high in also like B6, which is another one that's, like I said, progesterone, sometimes hard to get. So shellfish. And then for omega-3 fats, of course, things like salmon, shrimp. Those are also really good sources of omega-3s, which that ratio of omega-6 to 3 is really off in most of our diets.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I know that we have quite a plant-based audience. So for those of you listening that are like, oh my God, liver.
Yeah.
You can get all of your nutrients and vitamins and macronutrients from plants. You just have to be way more diligent about it. So it's not a no, not ever. It's more like it's really easy to get it from animal foods than it is from plants. So just keep that in mind. You know, we respect all of your opinions and food choices.
Yeah. Well, and that's where using a tool like Chronometer, like I was saying, is really helpful because you can look at, it doesn't matter what style you've picked. If you just see what you're eating and you're seeing what you're getting from your food, you can see, okay, is what I'm eating giving me what I need? If not, okay, let me go find sources for that are going to still meet my requirements and make me happy. But there's ways to determine if you're getting what you need.
I love it. I totally love it. Okay. So this has been incredible. Besides watercress, I feel like we are walking away with a lot of good, solid foundation in nutrition, as well as how that impacts hormones. Is there anything you would love to share before we end for today?
So this is not actually like something I would normally say, but I would also going to say, I think pleasure is an important part of eating. And there is, you know, anytime we're looking at food and people start getting obsessed with like, you know, even things I just said, like, are you getting the macros and the micros and all of that? I don't think humans are designed to only eat food for the nutrients. Like our palates enjoy food for a reason. And so we shouldn't be excluding the pleasure factor when we're making dietary changes, even if it is for our health and for the benefit of our health, our cells, our fertility, any of that. We have to also still enjoy our food. So whatever dietary plan you have, I think it's always possible to still find enjoyable foods and be playful and curious. So if you're like trying to find something new and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm reading all these labels and they all have super high, let's say cottonseed or soybean oil. And I'm trying to get like, I'm so sad I don't have anything. Like you could just like go, okay, I'm really curious about what's going to be delicious and amazing and fun. That's also going to give me the nutrients that I need.
Yeah. And always like, we may think that we have to eliminate everything that we enjoy, but in reality, there are probably healthier alternatives for everything that we enjoy, right? Like you can eat chocolate.
Yes, I eat chocolate almost every day. Super high in magnesium.
Super high in magnesium. And there are like, I was totally blown away. I'm like fiending for Lily's chocolate right now. Have you tried this?
Yes. Oh, for sure.
I cannot believe that there's no sugar in this. And we did a little experiment. We have a 4-year-old. So we went to a birthday party. This kid is not allowed to eat cupcakes and cake and all the junk that people eat. So I went and I was like, instead of that, I'm going to give you 3 pieces of chocolate. And I was thinking that I was going to go pick up Lily's. And we ended up just deciding, oh, too much work. Let's just give him the HU chocolate.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Coconut sugar. It's still really clean.
Still good. Yep.
Oh my God, this kid was bouncing off the walls from coconut sugar. And I was like, okay, so we have to realize like he does not ever get sugar.
Right.
So
because we can see what happens.
Right. So for a 4-year-old, like that much sugar was just too much. And that was a bad parenting move.
Yeah.
But I know that if we had given him Lily's, there would have been no reaction.
It would have been totally fine.
And it's delicious. It doesn't taste like stevia. I'm like obsessed.
It's really good. Yeah. Have you tried like all the flavors? I've been like I've been trying them all.
I haven't.
Yeah. I use Thrive. If you don't use Thrive, it's like the online grocery. Yeah.
Thrive Market.
They have all of the different flavors. Yeah. Been trying them all.
Yes. Ooh. Dangerous.
Yeah.
But I was just getting ready to say, like, that's one example of like alternatives done well and no loss of pleasure for the gain and benefit of the health. And I'm also a big believer in that. So whatever it is that you're craving, just know that either there's a healthier option out there, or you can probably like whip it out in your kitchen with like very minimal ingredients and have it taste amazing.
For sure.
So don't walk away from this as like deprivation, but really like, how can I do this better? Right?
Yeah. And I like to add first too. I always add before I take away. I'm like, let's flood your body with nutrients. And we're going to like find all of these fun, interesting foods, not immediate. Like, I just think that's a very Western idea of like, let's just take everything out first. But really, like, let's add some stuff that you need and that might be fun.
Right. Absolutely. I love that. That's such a great end note. Because for all of you listeners to walk away from this with like excitement about new foods you can try and how those might support your hormones and your health.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I know you have a few gifts for our listeners, so we will put the links in the notes. Do you want to share about what it is that you are gifting?
Yeah. So it's actually a guide, and the name of the guide is it's 5 metabolic mistakes women in midlife make. But honestly, this is just true for everyone. I think sometimes women who get past about 35, we see it amped up because it's like we've been maybe torturing ourselves for so long that we start to see those effects. But these are things that are when I say metabolism, I'm really thinking about how does our body make energy? And your body has to make energy to have healthy hormones to be fertile. I definitely think things like even like libido is a great marker of metabolism. It's my favorite one to ask about. Like, if you are not feeling frisky, I guarantee like there's a metabolic undercurrent. So those are, and I include some, like for sure, one of those is how to swap out your fats. So just basically, how do you help your body work better?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your amazing knowledge and wisdom, and for the gifts that we will link in the show notes, along with your Instagram and Facebook and all the social places that you can find Christine.
Awesome.
Thank you all for listening and tuning in, and tune in for the rest of the week for lots of tips from Christine. Was that an amazing episode or what? Make sure to check our show notes so that you can link up with our guests. And if you're not a part of our secret Fertile AF community, you can join for free via the link in our show notes. Last but not least, have you showed us some love lately? It would mean the world to us if you could share and review our podcast. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on Egg Meets Sperm. Peace.